You may think you know what the worst game console ever is. You may even think you've played it before. But maybe not. Maybe you have. I don't know. But if you're not thinking of RCA Studio 2, then you haven't even begun to see bad. There are always systems that people like to rag on constantly, like the Atari 5200 and Sega's 32X. But what if I told you those don't even come close to being the worst ever? This list will make paying $800 for a 3DO when it was brand new seem like the best idea ever. This would have been more convenient for me to have listed after the Atari Jaguar, but I don't think it's as bad. VM Labs was a company founded by former Atari execs, the same ones that helped run Atari straight out of business. Back in '98, when PlayStation was king, N64 was dying, and Dreamcast was on the horizon, VM Labs announced Project X. Creative name, right? It was supposed to be a Mario killer. Just check out this picture. Game magazines, which love to sensationalize these things, declared Project X to be a major contender in the upcoming console wars. This wasn't back in the BW era either. Forums full of burned Jaguar fans rallied behind the console. I bet they were disappointed when Nuon was announced. Nothing more than a chip, called Ares 3, for DVD players that would allow for some enhanced features and video games as well. But gaming wasn't even the core focus. Samsung, Toshiba, and RCA licensed the technology, but not even every Nuon-enabled DVD player can play the video games. That's right, it's a platform that didn't even have full hardware support. Only a few of the players are worth owning, and one of them is a Samsung DVD N501, and the best, of course, being the DVD N2000. How's that for a cool name for a console? We're gonna play some DVD N501, fellas. Come on over, bring an extra controller. Only 8 games were ever released, 2 of them, Tempest 3000 and Iron Soldier 3, being sequels to Jaguar games. Even fewer of the enhanced movies hit shelves. Just 4 DVDs supported the Nuon tech. Big, huge, giant hits like Bedazzled and Dr. Dolittle 2. The games that are worth playing are typically expensive. Next Tetris regularly sells for over $200. There is somewhat of a homebrew scene, however. Check out nuondone.com for more info on that. I don't hate this thing. In fact, in the days before Blu-ray, it was pretty cool to have. I could pop in homebrewed Doom and enjoy it. Now the tech is dated and there just aren't a lot of games. VM Labs quickly went bankrupt, and by 2004, their DVD technology was extinct. Once upon a time, in a world long, long ago before Android and iOS phones existed, Nokia and their indestructible mobile devices were king of the cell phone industry. Their Symbian operating system was the platform, and it was the primary one that mobile games were developed for. This seems like 100 years ago and yesterday, both at the same time. Nokia decided to capitalize on their market position by releasing a cell phone/portable game console in one. Makes sense, right? Well, actually it does. For the first time in history, everyone carried a cell phone. And if you already had a phone, why not make it a console? Why carry 2 devices? This was a great idea, actually, but it was executed fucking terribly. Nokia thought they did everything right. They got big developers like Sega and EA to sign on, and got big games like Sonic N and Red Faction as launch titles. They even had some critically acclaimed exclusives of their own, like 1, Pathway to Glory, and Asphalt. So what went wrong? Really, it was the wrong time. Released in 2003, it used SD cards as media. But by this time, advances in Wi-Fi and cellular technology made it so that sophisticated games could just be downloaded right out of the air. When N-Gage games began showing up on other Symbian devices, it made it hard for consumers to justify a special gaming phone. It had a particular hardware problem too. Nokia obviously wanted to keep the screens at a standard ratio for cell phones, therefore making the games cross-compatible. But gamers hated it, because it sucks. We don't like tall screens unless we're playing 1942. We like nice wide screens so we can see where the fuck we are going. I recall this being particularly frustrating in Sonic N, and just about every game that wasn't designed specifically for the N-Gage. Despite that, the D-pad and raised action buttons were welcome and made the N-Gage the best cell phone to game on. What really fucked it from the start is the American system of subsidizing cell phones with contracts. This shit is illegal in most parts of the world. If a phone costs $300, you pay it and then hook it up with any carrier with no bullshit contract. Yes, contracts are bullshit. This meant that anyone already in a contract had to wait for it to expire if they wanted the subsidy. Worse, even if you were willing to pay the full price of the handset, it meant that if your carrier didn't offer the N-Gage, you'd have to break contract and switch. My carrier didn't support the N-Gage at all. I had to take it to a back alley in a shitty part of town and have it, quote, flashed so I could use it as a cell phone. Fuck all that, though. Let's blame N-Gage's failure on the motherfucking side talking. Oh. Never heard of it? It was a popular meme inspired by the N-Gage. You see, the original model had an earpiece and receiver on the top of the phone, which looked silly, like talking into a taco. This, therefore, inspired people to talk into the sides of various objects. Entire websites were erected as shrines to the phenomenon. Today we just have Reddit. Thank God. Side talking was fixed with the updated N-Gage QD, a more compact version of the console/phone, but it didn't fix the sales. Meet the Apple Bandai Pippin @Mark@World. What the fuck? Who even makes this piece of shit? Is it an Apple product, a Bandai product, or is Pippin a brand in and of itself? All three appear to be true to some extent. Let's take a closer look. A team at Apple designed it, Bandai distributed it, and Mitsubishi manufactured it, and smartly kept their name off of it. Contrary to common belief, Pippin is not the name of the console. Rather, it's the name of the product line/software platform, and it was marketed as Pippin. That's Pippin spelled with an exclamation mark in it. The console itself is named @World in the US, and in Japan it's called @Mark. Does that clear things up? Everyone calls it Pippin though, so I will too. Remember, this is 1995, a year in which Apple would have gone out of business without an injection of cash from Microsoft. They had no idea what they were doing, and even Mac fans fucking hated Macintosh. And Pippin is a Mac. This was a brief era where computers were too expensive for many families to afford, so companies were looking for alternatives. Sega created Netlink, which is fucking awesome, for Saturn. WebTV was released, and Apple shat out this turd. The era didn't last long either, as the price of computers plummeted over the next several years. Pippin is a hard console to research because no one fucking owned it. Seriously, did you? Anyone you know? Ever even heard of it when it was new? Did EGM run a cover story of Pippin versus PlayStation? No. I don't even own one of these things, and I have 40 consoles sitting on my game shelf. In fact, it's the only console on this list that I don't own, largely because I can't justify the outrageous price for an @World model. And even if I did find one, good fucking luck on finding a single goddamn game for it. The research is so blurry, let me give you an example. Wikipedia is so confused that they have 2 articles on it under 2 different names. And one says the thing was released in North America in 1995 and discontinued in 1997. That's not the case. There are no press releases to be found online anymore. But I did find a CNN article, another one in PC World, that places the actual release date of the @World in late 1996 for the low price of $600. That makes for a hasty pre-Christmas launch that was followed by a post-Christmas/early 1997 withdrawal from the US market as the @World consoles were shipped back to Japan and rebranded as @Marks. It's the shortest-lived console in history. Only around 46,000 units were sold worldwide, not in the United States, not in Europe, not in Japan, but on the entire planet known as Earth. I've been racking my brain and trying to think of something good to say about it. It did have a release of Bungie's Super Marathon, so there's my one good thing that I could think of. I kind of spoiled this one earlier when talking about Nuon, but here's Atari Jaguar. Raise your hand if you grew up with Atari. Okay, put your hands down. For those who didn't, go buy an Atari Flashback 2 right now or something like it. Atari 2600 was awesome. Released in 1977, it was the first cartridge-based console to go mainstream, primarily based on Atari's rep in the arcades. That's right, arcade gaming used to be important, kids. Company founder and apparent idiot Nolan Bushnell got lucky. He let the employees run the company, which must be why it was so successful. He later sold out and sold the company to Warner, which is now known, of course, as Time Warner. This is the action that led to the near destruction of the home console industry in 1983. Fuck all that bullshit about Pac-Man and E.T. We're going to do a video on the true reasons for the crash later. Atari was then sold off to Jack Tramiel of Commodore fame. Tramiel didn't give a flying fuck about the video game console fad and branded Atari as a computer company instead, despite the fact that the 8-bit Atari 7800 was ready to go out the door in 1983 and was just about as powerful as the NES. The new Atari Corp apparently didn't even respond to a Nintendo request to distribute the NES for them. Instead of NES, we could have been calling it AES, Atari's Entertainment System, but no. Once Tramiel saw Nintendo's success in the market, he paid the debts Atari owed and rushed the 7800 out the door. A pretty good console actually, which failed for various reasons that we're not going to get into a lot here. But it includes ports of 1970s arcade games being released way too late, having no third-party support due to Nintendo's illegal practices, and Nintendo's illegal monopolistic practices. So Atari lost the 8-bit wars. They decided to give it another go with the 16-bit generation and something called Panther. Who knows if that would have even been any good or not, because they did the math and decided to scrap it for Jaguar, a quote 64-bit console with some rudimentary 3D polygon abilities. I was a kid when this came out, and anything 3D was cool, and it was the future. Jaguar was pricey, didn't have a lot of games, and neither I nor anyone I knew owned one at the time. But there was an incredible Universe store within bike riding distance. So I used to play Cybermorph, also known as the world's most annoying tech demo.
Where did you learn?
Still, when I got older and started collecting video games, I bought one so I could fully enjoy Tempest 2000, which I later found out had a glitch where you can't die, and Iron Soldier, which is kinda boring but still pretty cool, but not as nearly as bad as shit like Flip Out. Despite the fact that Jaguar sucked and no one liked it, Atari doubled down on Jaguar, releasing an expensive and worthless CD attachment, plans for a Jaguar Duo, which is exactly what it sounds like, a hybrid Jaguar CD console in one, and an upgraded Jaguar, not a full console, codenamed Midsummer and tentatively titled Jaguar 2. Yeah, this left Atari literally bankrupt. The company was reverse merged into a hard drive manufacturer called JTS, which later went out of business completely, and the rights to the name Atari have changed hands many times since. Did you know that CDs were developed after Laserdisc? It's true. Philips was one of the pioneers of the format along with Sony, and the two teamed up to make the CD a standard format. In 1993, Laserdisc had exactly a 0% chance of catching on. Who wanted movies the size of vinyl records? Everyone only said, I'll buy it when it's the size of a CD. Well, guess what? Philips listened and attempted to create a new standard, an upgraded CD, the CDI. As we learned with Pippin, CDI isn't really the name of a console. It's the name of a standard. The I stands for interactive. A CDI disc contains audio that can be played on any standard CD player, but could also contain graphics, CD plus G, and video, VCD, and as we all know, video games. The standard was developed by Philips and Sony in 1986, but it was not until 1991 when the Philips CDI 910 was released. This and the 400 series models are typically what are referred to as being CDI video game consoles, though several other variants were released, including handheld and portable devices. CDI fails as a game console because it wasn't a game console. It was really the market's first attempt at being a home multimedia center, similar to what the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 are today. It was for all entertainment, music, movies, karaoke, and video games. The problem was that no big companies signed on, and Philips had no idea how to make good video games. They hadn't made a console since Odyssey 2, which was a pretty fun console, but they had that one handed to them, and they still didn't manage it well. Famously, Nintendo signed a deal with Philips that allowed them to develop and release games based off of Nintendo properties. These included Hotel Mario and 3 fucking awful Zelda games.
Enough. My ship sails in the morning. I wonder what's for dinner.
Oh boy! I'm so hungry, I could eat an Octorok!
By 1994, the CDI player was marketed as a game console and failed.
Trust me, babe, I know about this CDI stuff.
I'll get into CDI starting at $2.99 with $200 of free software.
It was too late. By 96, the platform was abandoned and the Philips Magnavox Web TV was launched, which would compete directly against the Sega Saturn Netlink, which, remember, was fucking awesome. Viewmaster Interactivision.
What the what?
Viewmaster, the guys who make those goggles with the sliders? Yeah, those guys. They made a console. It's a rather long story that's rooted in the deep history of gaming. It involves Atari founder Nolan Bushnell, a never-released console codenamed Nemo, digital pictures, the infamous Night Trap video game, and a little-known Atari 2600 third-party developer called Axlon. Interactivision used the same VHS technology that was developed for the ControlVision console. That's right, VHS cassette tapes. Like Action Max, the console itself was required to be hooked up to a VCR. Media came on regular old tapes, and players would get a signal if the console was connected correctly. I felt that this process sucked. You could have done everything right and the console still would not detect your VCR, causing you to have to start all over again. What bullshit. The quote games were interactive versions of either Sesame Street or the Muppets, with the one exception being Disney's Cartoon Arcade, which is the only one I don't happen to own. The video effects are ridiculously impressive. Allow me to show a scene to you.
Ready, set, go!
That's why I sing la la la. Sing in my bird bath, la la la.
As I
the
soak
water.
myself, I lift my voice up loud.
You see how this is switching back and forth between videos? Yeah, that's actually being done by the player. It's a multi-track VHS. This is how Night Trap originally worked. On VHS. At various points in the video, there are game portions, all of which are ruined by this monstrosity of a controller. Looks like it was designed by Pablo fucking Picasso.
Oh, look at this. Oh, this is a funny looking thing.
Yeah.
As bad as it looks, it's even worse than that, I promise you. I fondly recall one such game known as Wiggle the Stick. Big Bird is holding this abortion of a controller and starts singing, wiggle the stick, just wiggle your stick. And Snuffleupagus joins in.
Okay, Snuffy. I think it's your turn to wiggle the stick. You got it.
This is fun. How about a little wiggling music, Bird?
Sure thing, Snuff. Wiggle the stick, wiggle the stick. Now that you've got it, you know the trick. All you have to do is wiggle the...
All you have to do is wiggle the... All you have to do is wiggle the stick.
And now we all know how to wiggle our sticks. It's pretty fucking fucktacular in a double facepalm sort of a way. But uh-oh, there's a brick wall blocking the video. So what do you need to do? Wiggle the stick around the screen to clear the box. How hard does that sound? Not hard, right?
And how do we get out of here?
It's one of the most fucking difficult things I've done in gaming. I can be Comic Zone in one life.
Okay,
I can
Snuffy,
breeze
but
through ghouls and ghosts.
because I don't think I like
Halo 1 Legendary? No problem. I cannot finish this in the allotted time because the controller does not respond to my commands. I may as well be attempting mind control. And I'm a grown adult who has been a gamer my entire life.
You hear that, kids?
This was designed for toddlers. Just think about that.
Just like I
So I
do.
got one of these and I tried to get my son to play when he was 5 and he was basically like,
Up and
fuck off,
down,
daddy. And that's all I can say to
side to
Viewmaster
side,
and this console
wiggling
is,
all around
fuck
to
off.
get us.
Did you know that there's a website that still sells these new with 15 new games for only $279? I paid $25 on eBay, which is about $5 or $10 or $25 too much. Let me read you an excerpt from the site. Quoting, even if you already have a computer with a CD-ROM, I can't read this with a straight fucking face. Even if you already have a computer with a CD-ROM drive, This unit is very desirable at this price point because it can help keep younger children from tying up and possibly messing up your valuable PC configuration. Why fight over one computer and risk having your hard drive erased? Why buy an audio CD player when you can buy this interactive player which automatically plays audio disc and comes with numerous free CD-ROM titles for the same price? Unbelievable. The language sounds like it was written recently by spammers from India. They do ask some good questions though, like, why fight over one computer? Why indeed? I bought my 8-year-old a laptop that comes with Windows 8, a 300 gig hard drive, and a Blu-ray player for less money than I would spend to buy this piece of shit. Oh wait, you're probably still wondering what the fuck this thing is, aren't you? Remember Pippin and what a steamer that was? This is kind of like that, but worse. Perhaps a better analogy would be that it's a worse CDI, considering that it was trying to be the same thing, a multimedia center, before it tried to be a video game console. Also called the Tandy Video Information System, it was released in 1992, sold only at Radio Shack, and after no one wanted to buy it for its futuristic, quote, CD playing abilities, it too was marketed as a video game console. The system ran a custom version of Microsoft Windows 3.x called Modular Windows, which allowed for a ton of crappy, interactive CD-ROM shovelware to be released for it, including interactive games like Sherlock Holmes, which would later be released on the much better Sega CD.
What rubbish! What balderdash!
V-Reader, V-Smile Pocket, V-Motion, V-Smile Baby, V-Smile, V-Flash, Go Fuck Yourself. Touted as education consoles featuring, quote, learning games, the V-Smile series of consoles preys on parents who are idiots. Usually, these kinds of systems get overlooked for lists like these. They have no collectible value and no notable games. Consider it a public service announcement. When I was a new parent, I was one of those complete idiots who tried this out. I wanted to get my son into gaming as soon as possible, so I bought him a V-Smile Baby console when he was like 10 months old or something. That's right, it's a game console for infants. It's recommended actually for 9 months to 3 years old. I could never get him to use it. I don't even think he understood the relationship between the controller and the nonsense that was happening on the television. Not that I blame him, I could hardly figure it out myself. Fortunately, that controller made beeps and noises outside the game experience, and he fucking loved that thing. As he got older, I got a V-Smile. It's like a 16-bit gaming system for kids ages 3 to 7. Big joystick, big button, should be easy. Boy was I fucking wrong. As with the aforementioned Interactivision, these games are generally unplayable. As in, not able to play. There was this Thomas the Tank Engine game, yeah, my kid was into that, where you were supposed to catch crates in the train. He got frustrated and put it down. I tried it, and the hit detection was so lousy that it's impossible. If one pixel from the crate landed outside the train car, then you miss the catch and you lose. I never even tried the more grown-up V-Flash, which is for ages 6 and up. I can't imagine wanting to. Now they have a V-Motion, God only knows what the shit that is, a handheld V-Smile Pocket for on-the-go torture, and a fake e-reader. Here is wisdom. No one is going to make a better video game than actual video game developers. Period. VTech aren't game developers, and the games they put out suck shit like some sort of shit-sucking Hoover. The son is now 9, and guess what he has? An Xbox 360, an Android tablet, and a Windows 8.1 laptop. He actually uses DOSBox on his own to load Scorched Earth and other classic games. Kids don't need kiddie learning consoles. They need real electronics that they can use for both learning and entertainment. My son uses his laptop and his tablet for school. There's a special place in hell for VTech, and it's probably next to Nolan Bushnell. So I actually learned that the game is not called Game.com. It's simply called Gamecom. Even though there's a dot right the fuck in the middle of it that would reasonably lead anyone to believe that the name of the system is Game.com. When this thing came out, it was 1997. Game Boy was an unstoppable juggernaut. I first saw a Gamecom at Church's Chicken next to my high school. I had to give a double take.
What the what?
Tiger, the company behind all those LCD games, made a real legitimate handheld console. It had a touch screen and came with a stylus. And get this, It had a 14.4K modem and could do email. There were even special websites that were basically text only so the Gamecom could render it. There are multiple versions of this thing too. The classic Chrome version, as I call it, followed by the more compact colored consoles, not color graphics, just colorful plastic casings, followed by the exact same thing only with a built-in light. It had a pack-in cartridge and built-in applications like a phone book and a calculator. It was poor timing. Everyone was getting cell phones by then. SNK's Neo Geo Pocket Color would come out the next year and be in color and have awesome graphics. In 2001, Game Boy Advance would be released and once again fully dominate the market.
Hail to the king, baby.
But that's not why Game.com failed. Fuck, I accidentally called it Game.com. Sorry. That's not why Gamecom failed. This piece of shit simply did not work. The developers were way over ambitious trying to get Sonic and Resident Evil 2 on this thing. The Sega Saturn didn't even get Resident Evil 2. The Sonic Jam game moves at about 3 frames per second. Resident Evil on this thing was a pipe dream. I once fired up Fighter's Mega Mix and quickly turned it off, packed it away, and never played it again. I don't mean to steal anyone's catchphrase, but I don't know what they were fucking thinking. There's even a version of Duke Nukem for it too. I don't even want to try it. Despite all of these flaws, the biggest failure of all would have to be the marketing campaign. Tiger commissioned a series of commercials in which a height-challenged gentleman calls gamers slackers, morons, and idiots. Because being degraded by a midget makes you want to buy your shitty fucking product. And why a dwarf? I am sure that somewhere there was an activist group for little people up in arms over that bullshit.
I have a surprise for all the slackers, but nothing better to do than play games and surf the net all day. Gamecom! Lay those bloodshot eyes on these babies! It speaks!
Let's rock.
Begs to be touched! Wires you to the internet! And it plays more games than you idiots have brain cells! Any questions? Does it play? Idiot! Next question! How about compatibility? How much does it cost? Let's get 'em!
Today, the console and games are very cheap. There's almost no collectible value here. Every once in a while, I do have a bit of fun by busting it out, only to show people just how bad it is. It's like, hey man, want to see something awful? Check out my Gamecom. Of all the failures in the history of gaming, this is the biggest. If we rewind back to the 1960s, inventor of the home video game console, Ralph Baer, was trying to sell his invention. RCA turned him down, and in the end Magnavox produced Odyssey, which launched in 1972. By the mid-70s, Palm consoles, which refers to dedicated consoles that only played the built-in games, were becoming more and more sophisticated, boasting better computing power and sharper graphics. Big companies were in on this: APF, Atari, Magnavox, Coleco, and more. Everyone knew that the next big breakthrough would be a console that was reprogrammable. In other words, one where you can change the game programs. You know, like cartridges. At the end of 1976, Fairchild Semiconductor was the first out the door with such a console. And it's the fantastic Channel F, which is just fantastic.
Fantastic!
Meanwhile, RCA had been racing to get their very own cartridge-based system to the market, the Studio 2. It hit store shelves in early 1977, just after the 1976 holiday season.
Missed it by that much.
This thing was literally dead on arrival. First, it didn't have controllers. Why the fuck did it not have controllers? Not even a joystick. Just 2 numbered pads on the console itself. The RF cable is 15 feet long because RCA expected you to sit this thing on your lap to play. For a 2-player game, you may as well be fucking your opponent because that's how close together you need to sit. There's literally no excuse for this. Odyssey, way back in 1972, the very first game console ever, had detachable controllers. Many of the best Palm consoles, like the Odyssey 3000, had wired controllers. The Channel F's controllers had 8-way directional control and 4 actions. Studio 2 was also in black and white, despite the fact that the games were programmed in color. Again, color wasn't a new concept. Channel F and many of the Palm consoles were in color. The graphics were a joke too, just as big of a joke as the games. Games like Freeway, where you endlessly drive a car on the road. a calculator could play a better game than this. The quote tennis game wasn't even built in. It was sold separately, and it's about the worst version of Pong I've ever played, with the ball changing direction at random. I'm told this is intentional somehow, but I feel like it's a glitch. The game's also so slow that you can literally sit down and play it against yourself with one hand on each of the 2 number pads. Once RCA got wind that Atari was releasing its first programmable console later that year, they pulled the plug and pretended that the Studio 2 never happened. At this point, you're probably asking yourself, if it's called Studio 2, then what the fuck is the Studio 1? And that's a valid question. RCA Studio at the time was synonymous with great recording studios. Big famous artists would come and record in RCA studios. This is called Studio 2 because it was a second studio. Instead of being an audio studio to record music art, this was a studio where you can play on your home TV and play game art that was nothing but game shit.